My camera's gonna overheat if we don't talk it to. Alright guys, so we are here with Josh today and we have basically done some comparisons between DGO on and DGO off when we're shooting an XF AVC. So let's just quickly break this down because a few things I want to talk about, basically like the things that we both noticed and kind of things that we, I guess, didn't notice as well. So first thing, the settings that we were actually shooting on to make this test possible is you have to shoot above 50 frames a second or 60 frames a second to basically turn DGO off. So essentially what we did is we set our shutter speed to 1/200 of a second, and then we shot in 50 and 100 frames a second. So essentially we could just switch back and forth between the two without having to change our I guess shutter speed settings to adjust for exposure and stuff. And then essentially we put them side by side to see what the difference was. And I'll be honest, I'll be straight up, I didn't notice a big difference to start off with. Right, so here are the side-by-side tests that we did with the Canon C70 and XF AVC. And basically one of them has DGO on and one has DGO off. I'm not gonna tell what it is just yet, but let me know below in the comments if you can tell the difference and which one you think is DGO on and which one you think is DGO off. And also why, like what are the reasoning behind why you think one looks different compared to the other.
Yeah, I mean, you sent it to me first before I got a chance to do my testing, and I looked at the images and I was like, I watched it like twice, and you wanted me to like make a recording in my reaction, but I actually just watched it and I watched it through twice and I was like, I see a subtle difference in the shadows, but I couldn't tell you which one was which. And then you gave me a hint, but then after I did my recordings, I could see the difference. But that's only because I had them, I knew which ones were which, and I could start to figure it out. But it was really hard to tell because you sent me one through a YouTube link, so that was even harder with the compression.
Alright, so let's quickly talk about what we noticed between the two clips, because realistically, even when you're looking at it on like a 4K display, like seeing everything close up, even the differences between that's like so subtle.
Yeah, I mean, the key that you gave me was looking at the highlights, and that's what I noticed after you said that, and also when I sat down to analyze my clips and look at the footage, because the exposure was exactly the same. Like I literally had it set up, I hit a button to change it from 100 frames to 50 frames to turn the DGO on and off. And the difference was on some of the highlights in certain parts, the DGO off, the highlights looked a little bit brighter, a little bit more like washed out, a little bit more like clarity to them. They weren't like blown out, but you know, it just didn't look as crisp and as much detail. And the DGO on, they just looked better. They looked more intact. They looked like there was more detail in them.
And the thing that I noticed when I was looking at it was, like, if you just look at an overall image where it's quite consistently exposed, that was the hardest one that I noticed. But when there was like really dark areas or really light areas, like in this clip here, where there's these like really hot out of focus bokeh reflections from the water, that is the number one thing that I was like, oh, I can see the difference there, like very subtly. And then like you were saying, there was a shot of you walking away, and again, in the top right, there was some like out of focus, like glistening off leaves and stuff. And again, if we compare those side by side, you can just see a subtle difference where with the DGO on, it's just kind of like slightly muted. Like it's the roll-off's just a little bit better.
Agree completely. And I noticed that on some shots, like on the ground, just little spots of bright light. That's where I saw it in my clips. And I noticed before you would give me the tip about the highlights, when I was watching your clips, the shadows looked slightly different, but I couldn't tell which one was which. Like they were slightly different exposures or colors. I couldn't really tell. And so, like you said, like most of the clips that I sent you, they were very well exposed, even though it was like a high dynamic range situation. I didn't blow out any highlights. I didn't really, make any mistakes with the exposure, but you had done some underexposure, right? And that you could see that even more, right?
You hit the nail on the head. For perfectly exposed stuff, I don't really see huge benefits to it. Like obviously you get a better highlight roll off and your shadows are a little bit cleaner and stuff, but I think where people are going to notice it the most is, say, if they're running and gutting and they don't have a perfect exposure and they need to kind of push and pull the image a bit more. Like if we look at these clips, this is basically, I think it was, I had an extra 4 stops of ND on and I pulled it back up in post, and you can see how much cleaner the shadows are when it has DGO on versus off. And it's just like, that's kind of like night and day. But again, shooting perfectly exposed, like the benefits are very negligible as well. But I guess the other thing as well is like, it's auto on when you're shooting an XF AVC. So it's not like you have to think about turning it on. You just have to obviously be more aware that, say, if you're shooting in low light conditions or you're potentially going to underexpose it when you're shooting higher frame rates, that the shadows aren't going to be as clean.
Yeah, I mean, for me, if I'm shooting in 24 or 25, I mean, it's on anyways. Like I can't do anything about it. But I've been really happy with the image. I haven't like complained about it, but I know a lot of people talk about the sort of magic of the DGO sensor, and I'm probably guilty of that too in some of my YouTube videos. So it's interesting to see that there really wasn't much difference in a well-exposed shot. That was crazy.
But anyway, Josh, appreciate you jumping on, man, and giving your expertise and joining in with this side-by-side comparison and kind of debunking the DGO, not myths, but I guess way that people see it from like a on-paper kind of thing.
Absolutely, man. Well, thanks for having me, and it was fun to collaborate on this and compare footage and understand the DGO a little bit better.
Alrighty guys, so I hope you enjoyed this breakdown and look at the DGO sensor and what it actually is and what it does, and I guess where you can use it to benefit you in your everyday shooting when you're shooting with the Canon C70. If you did enjoy this one, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. If you want to check out any more stuff just like this, be sure to check out Josh's channel as well as all the content I have in this channel, because we got so much stuff about filmmaking that will definitely help you level up your game. But otherwise, stay creative and just be you. Have fun.